Well, welcome everybody. You know, it's time to start when I hear that beautiful sound of the bells in Breslin Tower, and it is 6 o'clock, and uh, it was one of those beautiful Sewanee days today where you would have been out playing frisbee or hiking or finding a porch somewhere to sit around or hanging out in the quad. And to top it off, the sunset was just spectacular. So I wish you all were here. We miss seeing you so much. It's so fun to see your names here. And I just want to thank you all for joining us tonight. It means a lot to us that you would take time out of your schedule to be here. It's just a good way for us to kind of stay in touch and share news and just kind of really hear what's on your mind. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We are joined tonight by our 17th Vice Chancellor. I think this week or last week he celebrated 1 year of when he was announced as our 17th Vice Chancellor. And I was here for that day. And many of you, I think, may have been, but it was just a really big celebration, open arms with the news of our new Vice Chancellor. So that's pretty exciting. And many of you submitted questions ahead of time, and we will get to those. But if you have one that you think of now, please use the Q&A feature down below, and we'll try to get to those questions. And sometimes he monitors those and kind of takes control if he sees one. But if you don't know how to use that, if you've got my email, I'll try to check my email too during the call, but I'd love you to use the Q&A feature. But real quickly, I want to give you a quick, just tell you what a great start to this semester we've had so far. It's still a wacky semester, but we have 40 more students studying on campus than we had last semester. And last semester we had almost everyone but 200 on campus. And so that's exciting. And last Friday, we inducted almost 100 students into the Order of the Gown, one of Sewanee's wonderful traditions. And we completed Greek Rush with Shake Day on Saturday. And one thing we wrapped up last month was 55 years of Black alumni at Sewanee celebration. That was kind of all year long, but we had a series of events in February that one of the highlights was honoring Eric Benjamin for his years of service. And we are launching a Black alumni network, and it's going to be called the Benjamin Network. So that was exciting. What else is really exciting is we are having varsity athletic competitions, and we'll hear a little bit more about that from our Vice Chancellor. And then I also hope that you all got the news that if your reunion was last June and didn't happen, and then you're trying to plan for your reunion this June, we have moved both of those reunion celebrations to the fall at homecoming. We just didn't feel like we had any certainty to go forward with our June planning. So rather than be in limbo, we're going to all be together at homecoming and reunion weekend, and it's going to be so fun. So I hope you'll be here. There's a lot more to talk about, but I'm going to let our Vice Chancellor take it from here. Please welcome our 17th Vice Chancellor. I appreciate you being here. And we have some questions, but I wonder if you just might start with a general welcome and with some good news out of the admissions office.
The phrase of the decade is "you're on mute." Thanks, Susan. Parker, good to see you on the screen too. And good evening, everybody. It's an honor to be with you virtually. I can't wait to be able to do this in person. But here we are, here on the mountain. It has been, it's been a crazy year. Keeping a university open for residential education in the midst of a global pandemic of biblical proportions is a thing. And yet we've done it. And that is a testament to the extraordinary work and efforts of all of our team here on campus, as well as the cooperation of the vast majority of our students with our public health guidelines and protocols. We were able to make it successfully through the last semester. As Susan mentioned, we've had a great start to the semester already as a result of our comprehensive testing protocols and the cooperation of our students, we've now been able to expand the size of outdoor gatherings to 100 students as of Tuesday, as Susan also mentioned. We are participating in Varsity Athletics, home games only, but we'll have almost 100 spring sport competitions scheduled here on the mountain for the remainder of the academic year through the spring sports season. And we are now allowing students to go and, as of this weekend, go and cheer on our teams in person. So it's going to feel as close to normal as we can possibly get it, while also ensuring that we are doing everything that is necessary to keep our community safe. As Susan mentioned, another sort of great news is that we've had a banner year, a record year, even in terms of application numbers. I think we have, as of today, 5,080 something and something, some more now than we did as of May last year, and last year was a record year. And also I've seen some of the preliminary data from the classes, from the candidates in this class, and it is amongst the strongest academically candidate pool that we've ever had. So it's all very exciting. And we are looking forward to continuing through the semester to make it to May, as we're saying, and look forward with the cavalry on the hill with widespread vaccine distribution coming. We're hopeful to get back to normal as soon as possible to see the real Sewanee by fall.
That's right. And we can't wait for that, for you to meet our alumni and for our alumni to meet you. So I was on a couple of Zooms with you today with our staff members, and I heard you talk about student success and how important that is for Sewanee and for all of our students. And I think that's become one of your priorities. Can you talk about some of the steps you're taking and why it's so important? I think our alumni will find this interesting.
Sure. So the first thing to understand is the environment in which we find ourselves. So starting in 2026, we are going to be involved in the most competitive environment in the history of American higher education. Let me explain to you a bit about why that is the case. So essentially, people stopped having babies at the same rate during the 2008 financial crisis. And that first group of students will be 18 years old in 2026, which is tomorrow. And it will be at least 20% smaller than previous cohorts and will remain that way, demographers tell us, as far as the eye can see. Further, it will also be the most diverse group of 18-year-olds applying to college in American history. And so basically what that means is that the same number of institutions of higher education, about 3,000 in the United States, will be competing for a pool of 18-year-olds that is at least 20% smaller, in some cases even smaller than that, depending on how the demographics play out about who actually is going to be college bound. And they'll be more diverse than ever. Now, here's the thing. The top schools by category, liberal arts colleges such as ourselves, comprehensive four-year public flagships like University of Tennessee, and four-year comprehensive private universities like the Ivy Leagues. The top 25 by category, they're all going to be fine. They may have to dip a tiny little bit into their applicant pool, but they are going to be fine. Everybody else is going to be in the fight for their lives. So since 1998, the University of the South has seen a precipitous decline in its ranking relative to its peers. We were ranked as high as number 23 in the U.S. News and World Report amongst liberal arts colleges in 1998. We are ranked number 47 today. Now, the way U.S. News and World Report rankings work is, as you know, they have a whole series of categories that they measure schools on, everything from student-teacher ratio to percentage of Pell eligible students to involvement of faculty or alumni in terms of giving and things of that nature. And institutions that participate in the survey give a bunch of data to U.S. News and World Report. They crunch the data, they give you a score, and that score is then plotted against your peers by category, and that's how you get your ranking. So since 1998, if you plot our raw score over those 23 years, you get a regression line that looks more or less flat, hovering around a mean of 73, meaning that we've done very well over the last 23 plus years, keeping things pretty much the same on the issues, on the aggregate issues that we're measured on relative to our peers. But if you plot our ranking relative to our peers, we get a line that looks like this. Negative regression line, a downward slope, which looks like a nosedive. And so that means that number 47 is a very dangerous place to be going into 2026. If you further unpack that information, what you find is that on the categories that have to do with student success, which also, by the way, are the categories that are weighted the highest in the rankings, things like the caliber of our overall pool that we bring in each year, measured by test scores and GPA, our ability to retain students in the first and second year, our ability to graduate students within 6 years. On those categories, we are somewhere between number 65 and number 80 in each of those categories relative to our peers, despite the fact that our overall ranking is 47, because as I say, we do well in other areas. So what that means is that focusing on student success is the ball game. Both because, since that's why we're here, there is an inherent moral imperative to do better on issues of student success to help our students, prepare our students for life after college. And in so doing, we will also improve our raw score in those categories, and then also improve our categories versus our peers. So for example, I've told our team here that the rabbit that we are chasing, as if we were greyhounds at the track, is Kenyon College. Why Kenyon College? Because Kenyon College is a school much like Sewanee, small, liberal arts, Episcopal, rural school. And they're in Ohio, meaning that they're not like located like we are, where we have Atlanta and Chattanooga and Nashville within short driving distance. But in 1998, when we were ranked number 23, Kenyon was ranked number 36. And today, when we're ranked number 47, Kenyon is ranked about number 25. They're kind of actually tied for the 25th position. So technically it says 27, but basically it's the same. Meaning that though they have the same profile as we do, and they were 10 points lower than we were, 13 points lower than we were 20 years ago, they're now 20 points higher than us. That's all the bad news. Here's the good news. We can do this. We can absolutely do this. And furthermore, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We simply have to do better at things that all of our peers, dozens of them, are already doing better at. And by the way, we simply have to be as good as we used to be, as objectively measured by the data. And not only be that good, but actually be a little bit better to secure our long-term position relative to our peers, which allows us to do all sorts of other things in terms of ensuring that we're getting high quality students for long periods of time, actually allowing us to rethink our tuition rates because people will pay more for an education that's that frankly is ranked higher in the marketplace. So that's where we are, and that's why our focus areas are on three things: student success, diversity, equity, inclusion, and generating alternative sources of revenue. Because frankly, the other bit is that we simply have to do better on diversity, equity, and inclusion. In the year 2021, the University of the South is 86% white. Now, I understand there's a school of thought that says, so what? Why do we even sort of look at race as a category? There are two reasons. One is more kind of philosophical, the other is practical. Philosophically, an objective look at our history shows that we affirmatively kept our doors closed to anybody that wasn't white for 2/3 of our history, until we graduated our first African-American graduate in 1970, the year after Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. And so we have to simply do more now than having shut our doors for 100 years to sort of open it and then assume that people just want to sort of crop in. we actually have to do the work, continue to do the work, and redouble it to ensure that anybody who wants to seek the insights on the mountain, feels comfortable being here, wants to come and be a part of our community, because we want them and we need them. The practical reason is that the nature of the applicant pool of students for which we're going to be competing against as we enter the second quarter of the 21st century is going to be more diverse than we've ever seen. And we simply cannot expect to attract top talent from this increasingly diverse applicant pool if we don't do a better job of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Amongst the top 25 liberal arts colleges in the United States today, the only one that has a demographic profile that looks anything close to ours is Washington and Lee, which has similar historical markers as we do. The top 2 liberal arts colleges in the country, Amherst and Williams, are at parity in terms of white and non-white. Davidson is almost, it's about 36, 37% non-white. And so we have to do better in that space. And then finally, with regard to alternative sources of revenue, if you assume that that undergraduate revenue is going to be under pressure in this new environment, that means that we simply have to think about other ways to generate revenue for our core academic mission beyond undergraduate tuition, which is why we're thinking really quite seriously about the development of additional graduate programs, and also why we now have a new Vice President for Economic Development, David Ships, whose job is to think about this 24/7. What additional private sector enterprises can be launched, can be partnered with our university in ways that not only generate revenue for our core academic mission, but that can also bring more amenities to the mountain in ways that enliven all of our collective life here. So that's a rather large, big nutshell to start, but I hope that answers some of the questions.
Yeah, I think that's a great overview. I love that those are your priorities and that you talked about them. And I don't know if you want to share any more about what some of those graduate programs might be, what you might be considering, or some of the ways you are working towards the DEI progress.
Sure. So the 3 that we're thinking about right now that I've asked my team to take a hard look at and do market surveys for. The first is a master's degree in environmental studies. So we have the 2nd largest contiguous campus in the United States of America. We have the greatest flora biodiversity of any university in the United States. We have, if you sort of correlate sort of all of our undergraduate programs, majors that have to do with the natural world, so natural sciences, geology, ecology, whatever. We have 30 faculty already in this space. And we routinely send our undergraduates to go do master's degrees at Yale, Duke, University of Tennessee, University of Georgia, in all these areas, in forestry and whatnot. And they send their graduate students to the domain to do research. And as we get more and more, as the marketplace becomes more and more sophisticated about the need for credentialed environmental professionals, the question is, why are we sending all of our best students to other places to go get those graduate credentials? Why are we not keeping them here and attracting other students from elsewhere to come here and earn graduate degrees and professional certifications? So that's the first, obvious thing. The second thing is that we're going to take a hard look at creating a school of allied health. Not a medical school, but a school that does all the ancillary, or many of the ancillary paraprofessional programs in healthcare other than MDs. So physician's assistants, nursing and nurse practitioners, respiratory therapists, physical therapists, dietitians, who are particularly trained to practice in rural and remote medicine. So you can practice in Louisiana or you can practice in Liberia. Why do we do that? For 2 very big reasons. The first is that healthcare is 20% of the American economy. And you can't outsource it. Well, you kind of can, but you can't, right? I mean, you can outsource it to radiology scans, but you can't really outsource the people that are actually engaging with you and doing physical exams and those sorts of things. And because our beloved South has the worst health outcomes of any region in the country. So our helping to credential people that are interested in developing professional credentials and licensures in this critically important sector for which there will be jobs and which will serve an inherent moral good to society by training people that help will take care of people's health is a win-win-win. The third that we're thinking about is creating a full Master's of Fine Arts. So as you all well know, Sewanee is very well known for its English and writing, literature, poetry, playwriting, etc. We have several years ago created the School of Letters, the Graduate School of Letters, which actually costs us money to offer. And so my view is we either need to go hard or go big or go home. So we're going to first try to go big and do the market survey to determine whether or not there is a role for us to play in offering an MFA that is focused in literature and playwriting, or that may have a particular focus of literature, playwriting, and dance, performance, or whatever else. Particularly as we are so close to both Nashville and also to Atlanta, that both have very vibrant creative communities. And then we'll see. And as I've told the faculty and others, and share with all of you, if there is a compelling argument for another graduate program that makes sense for us to do, that it's consistent with our identity, that's consistent with our mission, and that will generate appreciably more resources than it costs us to offer, and it's not one of the three I just offered, I am all ears. Please share with us, and we'll take a hard look at it and see what makes sense.
Great, thank you. There's been a couple questions sort of along the topic we were just talking about, but can you share what our retention rate is currently among all students and then students of color? And then I know that someone talked about our curriculum and how that might attract more diverse students. So can you talk about all of those things?
Sure. Well, one of the things I will tell you is that, interestingly, our data is not as good and is not as refined as I would like it to be. And so therefore, one of the early hires that we did is we created a new position, Vice Provost for Student Success, whose job it will be to oversee our Dean of Students, Dean of Student Life, our admissions office, our registrar in institutional research, as well as our advising offices, so that we can actually further drill down into sort of granular detail to understand what is happening with student success. So, for example, to your point, are we seeing students that are leaving from certain zip codes or certain ethnicities or certain majors or what, so that we can actually have more targeted interventions. Now, so what we do know on a more macro level is the following. So our overall second-year retention rate, two-year retention rate, based on the latest U.S. News and World Report rankings, is about 88%. Now, that may sound good, but our peers that are in the top 25 were anywhere between like 93 and 99%. Where I came from before, the Elliott School of International Affairs, inside the Elliott School alone, which is one of the top international affairs schools in the world, and which by student body was larger than Sewanee. We had 2,500 undergraduates and 800 master's students. We had a two-year retention rate of 95% and a four-year graduation rate of 98%. And we need numbers that look a lot closer to that. Unfortunately, I cannot disaggregate that information for you as it relates to race. What I can tell you is this: we know as a general proposition that students who are stronger upon entry tend to retain better, and they tend to graduate on time. Students that are weak upon entry tend to not retain well over 2 years, and they tend not to graduate on time. We also know from the little from the anecdotal data that we do have that's been captured in the last several years, that the number one stated reason, self-reported reason, for why students who are admitted to Sewanee, good students who are admitted to Sewanee, choose not to come is the party culture. It's not a rural location. It's not a lack of academic program. It's not cost. It's a party culture. By party, I don't mean playing Twister or pin the tail on the donkey. And they're not going to convents or monasteries. They're just going to someplace else where they can actually kind of find themselves in a different undergraduate experience, where the nature of the party culture as they see it is, pick your word, more healthy, less dominating, et cetera. And we also know the number two reason for why students who are here leave voluntarily is their party culture, behind finances as the number one self-reported reason. And so we have some serious work to do as relates to student life, both because we want our students to be able to flourish, and also because the way in which it's currently organized is objectively hurting us in terms of our ability to attract and retain strong students.
Great, thank you. I'm going to change topics real quickly. We talked about how awesome it is that we have varsity competitions now. I know this is a topic that's been of interest with parents, but some of our alumni are also parents. They want to come to the games. Do you mind to just quickly summarize how we came to the decision that we are versus our other conference schools, and a little background on how the decision was made?
Sure. So first of all, our conference president this year, who's the president of Birmingham Southern, made clear that as we were deciding our various decisions for both spring and winter athletics, wanted to assert the principle of institutional autonomy first, meaning that every institution would have to do what they thought was in their best interest, as opposed to, for example, conference consensus being the operating principle. And so we're all in very different positions. So we have Rhodes in the middle of Memphis, right? That on the one hand is in the middle of a city and has lots of healthcare options, but on the other hand is in the middle of a city that's been hit pretty hard by COVID. Then you have us on a mountaintop with, there are less than 25 ICU beds that can provide ventilator support within a 50-mile radius of where I'm sitting right now. And our local hospital down the mountain in Winchester has already gone to emergency status to create other parts of the hospital into ICU wards. And they tell us that there's not another hospital within 150 miles of them they could transfer critically ill patients to, because everybody else is essentially at or near capacity. And so what we know for us has worked is our bubble strategy. That is both keeping people here, absolutely minimizing to those at a bare minimum that are mission critical visitors, and being able to test everybody here weekly, all of our students weekly, and being able to have a public health infrastructure that can do contact tracing robustly and quickly. That has worked for us, which is why we were able to stay open all throughout the fall. So as we were approaching how to think through our spring sports, I was particularly sensitive to this because I know that our spring athletes lost their spring season last year. And so basically it came down to one of three options. Either we could approach our spring athletics as we did our winter athletics, which is we would play home games only. We would invite teams to come play us. We would pay for their travel to come here and their expenses when they stayed here. We would loosen our restrictions for masking during competition in spring sports because of the nature of these spring sports. We were distant, or it can't be more just like tennis, as opposed to basketball inside when you're up in each other's grill inside. That's option one. So we would not allow students to travel or athletes to travel, but we would accept students to come here to play, and we would test them upon arrival to verify their negative status. They would play and then go back home. Option two was we would allow our athletes to travel and participate in a full conference schedule, but everybody else would have to stay here. Meaning the bubble would apply to every other student except for our student athletes. The athletes would have to go compete and come straight back. Option three is no bubble. We'll allow athletes to travel. We'll allow everybody else to do whatever it is they wanted to do, because at least it's intellectually consistent. We rejected option three as unsafe. because the guidance from the regents, clear as a bell, was that one, we're to keep everybody safe, and two, we were to make it to through the semester, the end of the semester, with an in-person educational experience, which then left options 1 and 2. So the first week back, I did 6 town halls with student athletes, student non-athletes, parents, faculty members, other members of the community, to ask this question: would you support allowing our athletes to travel while everybody else stayed here? And the answer was a pretty firm no across the board, that if we're in this together, we're all in this together. And while certainly there was feeling that our athletes would miss out by not participating in conference travel, there was also a very strong feeling that everybody else is making significant sacrifices. Whether that be our theology graduate students that can't do their formation placements, which are essentially like internships at local parishes because they have to stay here. And by the way, those that are married can't have, if their spouses are not here, their spouses can't visit without quarantining for 2 weeks. To our college students that have field studies off the domain that they're unable to do, to just your average student that wants to be able to go to the mountain goat and get a pizza, or go home to Nashville and see their parents for a weekend. And so the view was, if we're all in it or we're not. And it was very clear to me that if we did not, that if we took that option of allowing athletes to travel, we would immediately lose any rationale for keeping anybody else here, which then puts us back in option 3, which, as I said, was unacceptable. And so we're at option 1. The good news is that our athletic department has done wondrous work to create many opportunities for our athletic teams to compete here at home. We have almost 100 athletic competitions, home athletic competitions, scheduled for the spring across all of our sports. I suspect that number will grow as other schools in our conference, and even some that are out of our conference, have games canceled on them because their opposing team has a COVID violation and they've got to bye, and then as opposed to taking a bye, they'll come to Sewanee and compete. And so why can't we have spectators come and watch their student play? For the same reason that we can't have parents come and watch their child sing in the Sewanee choir, or watch their child do a dance performance or a theater performance, because we have to be equal and fair for everybody. And the option of maintaining the bubble, particularly maintaining it for people that are going to be in close proximity to students, as parents would be, means that we have to regrettably prevent parents from coming for competitions and performances and whatnot. The good news, as I say, is that we are just one more semester, and hopefully these are the last set of really hard decisions like this we'll have to make, and we will be able to return to something close to normal by the fall.
Great, thank you. So we've got a lot through the Q&A, but I'm going to go back to the ones that were submitted ahead of time. I'll go back and forth, but there was somebody asking about the status of the fire department. I know that that's another great tradition, and I know there were signups for tryouts last weekend, but can you give an update on the department and the chief position?
Sure. Well, the department's doing great. They responded beautifully to a number of calls over the holiday period. All of our student firefighters, by the way, have also now been vaccinated as frontline first responders. As a result of the challenges with the fire department and the personnel changes that were there last spring, we made a number of sort of what I consider to be significant improvements. So first of all, the position description and the posting for a new fire chief will likely go out this week or early next week. It has been developed both by our new vice president for public safety and emergency services, Chip Shane, who is superb, with input from the student fire chief, the fire department, and others. As vice chancellor, I now have a bi-monthly personal one-on-one meeting with the student fire chief, so that he can communicate to me directly any issues that he may be having and the fire department may be having. And his name is Sam Everett. He is superb. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of young leaders over the course of my life. He is absolutely amongst the best of them, and it is just really fantastic. I've even said that I'm going to do the tryouts to be a Sewanee Volunteer Fire Department volunteer myself, scheduled for later this month or early April. I may not make it, but I'm going to do it as a show of both solidarity and respect for everything that our volunteer firefighters do. And so I'm very comfortable that the department is in good shape. It absolutely will retain its character as a volunteer fire department, and they'll continue to serve our community admirably.
Great, thank you for that. We have somebody has maybe been in conversation with you about the Chicago statement, and would the university adopt that? If maybe you need to explain that, I'm not familiar with it.
Sure. So the Chicago statement is essentially a statement of principles out of the University of Chicago that is meant to create space for the free flow of ideas and free exchange of ideas and debate, even things that may be challenging or uncomfortable. And the question is whether or not the University of the South will sign on to that. My view, since every time I've been asked that question, is the following. Personally, I'm supportive of it, of the principle. But for those who know how universities work, that is a statement, the debate or adoption of that statement is something that really needs to come from the faculty. It would be the worst thing in the world for the vice chancellor unilaterally to say we're going to adopt that. That said, let me tell you a story about how strongly I support the notion that we're going to debate tough things. I've been in this job not a month, and I got a call from a member of a class in the 70s who called me and wanted to make sure that I would ensure that all sides of this racial stuff, as he called it, would be debated. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, of course, everybody knows that slavery was bad, but not all slaves were treated badly. And slavery was a necessary evil to build our country. I said, well, it was evil, but it wasn't necessary. He said, well, slavery was a business decision. In business, you have to make tough decisions. And he reiterated his request to ensure that I would allow all sides of an issue to be debated, to include, in this case, the relative merits of slavery. And I said, yes, of course I would. Because I believe in the free debating of ideas, and that it is with contesting challenging ideas that we get to some greater sense of truth and community. So I hope that story demonstrates my commitment as Vice Chancellor to a free debate of ideas here at Sewanee.
Thank you. And speaking of commitment, we've had a couple questions in a couple different ways, but it makes me think they're questioning Sewanee's commitment to both Greek life, the future of that, and varsity athletics. Two different topics for sure, but how do they bring value to the experience?
Sure. I will. So let me address Greek life first. So I have had this question multiple times. I met with the ISC president today and said, I want to spend time before the end of the semester with every single Greek organization in their houses, just talking. You know them. I have no idea what the difference is between a TPK and an AKA or whatever. I don't know them, right? I don't know the different personalities of these Greek organizations, but I want to learn them because frankly, in my community, the African-American community, Greek life is vital. It is a lifelong commitment. My father was an A-Phi-A, the oldest African-American fraternity, the same fraternity as Martin Luther King. My mother's an AKA, Alpha Kappa Alpha, same sorority as the Vice President of the United States. It's a thing, and they are that like for life. I did not pledge because we did not have fraternities or sororities at the Naval Academy when I was there, although I'm feeling increasing pressure to pledge a graduate chapter. That's a whole nother story. And so as a general proposition, as I've told multiple times, our Greek presidents, I value Greek life. I understand the social aspect. I understand the intergenerational aspect of it, and I understand the statement of principles that I've seen on many of their websites. Now, having said that, as a newcomer to this community, if you'd ask me, what does fraternities and sororities do? I could tell you on my observation that they have houses where people live and they have lots of parties where a lot of alcohol is served and where it has been reported on good authority that there are often drugs available. Now, maybe they do more than that, but it is not obvious to the casual observer. And so I don't want to see Greek organizations disappear, but I think we need to have a serious conversation about the innovation of Greek life, because I think they can do more than that. And I think it is frankly nothing more than a lack of imagination. For example, I said, like the week before the election, the presidential election, I was meeting with the Greek presidents, as I do regularly. I said, look, I mean, we're about to have one of the most contentious presidential elections in American history. Like, why are you guys not hosting watch parties or hosting debates? And I said to the fraternities, look, sexual assault is a serious issue here. It's a serious issue across universities in the United States. We are no exception. I don't understand why you fraternities are not on the front lines of addressing this cultural issue through awareness campaigns, through trainings and discussions in your frat houses and whatnot, through pick your thing. Let's find out what's happening in other universities and why you guys can't take this and own this. So that's a long way of saying I do not want Greek life at Sewanee to go away. I have no intention for it to go away on my watch, but I certainly do want to see it evolve. And I think that's entirely appropriate. As it relates to varsity athletics, I am a huge, huge believer in the value of athletics. Huge. I was at the Naval Academy. Everybody had to do a sport. I was a fencer. I qualified for the Junior Olympics in foil my sophomore year. And I know what it's like to have those dreams, like the rug pulled out of you, because the Naval Academy, in its infinite wisdom at the time, eliminated the fencing program weeks after I qualified for the Junior Olympics in a cost-cutting exercise during the great defense budget cuts of the early 1990s. They have since restarted for years now the fencing program, but I know what that gut punch feels like. And so, as I've said to our athletes, I know a lot of them are really angry with me for the roles, the decisions we had to make with regard to varsity sports. But I've been there. I get it. I know what it's like. And I am certain, right now, our student body is about a third student athletes. I would love for that number to be half, because as a general proposition, student athletes are good for our community. There's an automatic, ready-made sort of community for those athletes, both in their own athletic teams and in context with other athletic teams. There's a structure to their day that the discipline of their sport requires. They have a whole nother set of more mature mentorship through their coaches, which helps them sort of get through life. And they turn out to be, they're healthier and all that sort of stuff. And so we have not yet framed our next financial campaign, fundraising campaign. But other than scholarships, which always should be at the top of every campaign, I'm convinced that the number one priority, right behind scholarships, is going to be a full renovation of our athletic facilities. Because I want to have, top-notch athletic facilities that are better, or at least as good as, the high school athletic facilities that our student athletes are coming from. And we're overdue for an overhaul. And so that's at least my commitment to varsity athletics.
Great, thank you for that clarity. And speaking of the overhaul, that will probably require some campaign funding. And so a few people are asking about how, I know we just completed a campaign and we're in the middle of COVID, but how is our giving looking? Is any of your priorities resonating with people, like the 100% full need, or some of your DEI? Can you talk about if you're seeing interest?
Sure. Well, the short answer is I've not been focused at all on giving right now. I mean, we are just trying to get through this enormously challenging year. I am told writ large, with Jay Fisher on this call, and I'm prepared to have the record corrected by anything I'm about to say, but generally speaking, our annual giving, our annual fund is up, while our overall giving in terms of the aggregate is down, but that's not surprising because we've just come off of a major campaign. So you would expect to see that dip. Vice Chancellor's got to fundraise, right? That's the thing. That's my job. And so you may have seen the news that Jay Fisher, who is our current Vice President for University Relations, under whom our development office runs, has announced that he is going to step down and move into a role as Secretary of the University. Which is an opportunity for us to do a search for a new vice president for university relations, who will, amongst other things, will be my road partner, my battle buddy for the next campaign. And so it's still a little bit too early to talk about fundraising or a campaign in a kind of structured, strategic way until that person is on board, which I hope will happen later this year. And then we'll get our ducks in a row and you'll hear from us again.
Great, thank you. A few people are curious about commencement and what that might look like. I know last year we had to go totally virtual for that class, and so we're coming up on another class. So can you give an update?
Sure. So I am expected to receive a briefing from Jay Fisher and his team for the end of this week on options for how to do commencement for the class of 21. Basically, there are three things on the table. One is to have a commencement that only includes the students, no guests while they're all here. The second is to do a full-on typical Sewanee graduation for the class of 2021, but do it in August, before the start of the school year, but after we've essentially released the bubble, and by which point we expect every American adult who wants to be vaccinated to have access to a vaccine. And the third will be some option to be able to do May 2021 with guests, which is a much more difficult enterprise from a public health perspective. And so our team has been working with our public health officers, our university marshal, and other whatnot to craft a plan to examine for that third option. I have not yet seen it. Again, I anticipate seeing it into this week, early next week at the latest, but probably into this week. And then as soon as we've made a decision, we'll get an answer out. And I know that people are planning and really want to know. I feel that pressure. We know it, and we're going to get you a response as soon as we can.
Thank you. This hour is flying by, so I want to get to some other questions, but I know COVID has been sort of the underlying topic of everything we've talked about, but some of our alums may not know about our testing facility. Can you talk about how successful that's been? And there's a lot of questions about vaccinations for faculty.
Yeah. We made the decision towards the end of last semester, and we saw both how critical it was to our ability to remain open and attract the spread of the disease, to be able to test the entire student body at least once a week and test individuals at will as needed, to build our own lab. We looked at the finances of it, and it turns out to be a no-brainer. It's like a third of the cost than it was to do what we were doing, which was essentially contracting with Baylor Labs out of Chattanooga. And so we built our own lab in Woods Lab. It's being run by doctors Clint Smith and Alyssa Summers, who run all of our testing for us here. And it allows us to test everybody here, all the students weekly. We could go twice weekly if we had to, and have the individual results back within about 3 or 4 hours. It's extraordinary. And further, those lab facilities that we've built will continue to be of value to us as a university, both for research and potentially even for some private sector lab testing in ways that generate revenue for the university when we were on the other side of this pandemic. With regard to the distribution of vaccines, we have applied for Sewanee to be a vaccine distribution site, and in consultation with Walgreens, which is our partner for the distribution of our annual flu vaccine. When state of Tennessee guidelines open up and make vaccines more available beyond those that are in higher risk categories, we are hopeful that we'll be chosen as a vaccination site, but it's not up to us because we don't have control of distribution. It's really up to the departments of health in the state. Yeah, but we continue to be in dialogue with them on that matter.
Great. Totally changing topics, but can you talk about how your international relations and diplomatic experience might come into play at Sewanee?
Sure. Well, as I've said, I want to help bring the world to Sewanee and Sewanee to the world. I mean, the good news is we're doing an awful lot of that work already through our offices, global citizenship, and through our study abroad programs, et cetera. I very much hope that we can do an awful lot more of that. You may have heard me say that I believe that Sewanee should be the Aspen of the South, minus the skiing. And that we become a place where we have a year-round program for holding conferences and convenings and confabs and concerts on ideas and culture and music and politics, international affairs, and whatnot. And in fact, we are conceptualizing something that we call the Veranda series, not porch, but veranda. Which we hope to do the first one over a weekend in the spring of 2022. So think of it more like a Southern Aspen Ideas Festival, or a kind of a South by Southwest with a higher dose of conversation and a smaller dose of music, to bring people from far and wide, both across the country and across the ponds, to come here and engage on those matters. I also continue, obviously, to think about international affairs issues. I have an article in the latest edition of print edition of Foreign Affairs called "The Fractured Power: How to Overcome Tribalism," making the case that our increasing social and political divisions are actually hurting us in the world and our national security. And I also had the high honor of testifying before the House Foreign Affairs Committee in their first hearing in the new Congress just last week, about the future of American foreign policy and priorities under this new administration.
Great. We're getting close to 7 o'clock, and there's a lot of little follow-up questions that we can do. People are very excited about some of the things we've discussed tonight, but I want to wrap up with this last topic. It was one of the most common questions we got ahead of time. And a few weeks ago, you spoke at Growing in Grace, and that message was shared, and you spoke about the vandalism at your home, Chen Hall, and people have just really wanted to hear about that. Do you feel safe? What do you think the motivation was? We also know it's made some national news, and your message was sort of one of forgiveness, but there have been a lot of other messages that seem to have come out of it. And like, do you feel like that's the climate on Sewanee's campus, and how can alumni help?
Sure. Well, I appreciate the broad questions. So first of all, as I said in my remarks, it took me a while to speak about this publicly. I felt that it was necessary because the incidents have been escalating, and provocations that are unanswered escalate. And as I also said in my remarks, any husband or father would do the exact same thing to assert the sanctity and dignity of their home. And in speaking publicly, I made a bet on the decency of the Sewanee community. And people showed up in droves, not just physically on the night, but with an outpouring, really, of both support for my family and me, for which I'm most grateful, but from which I'm equally, if not more so, grateful. People standing up and insisting that Sewanee is a place where everybody will be treated with dignity and decency. And you know a community by its boundaries. We are delighted to welcome anybody here that treats everybody with dignity and kindness. And there are things that we will not tolerate towards anybody. And I was deeply gratified that that message was received and shared. It is given great import to a series of conversations we're having here on campus now about culture, and helping other people help us understand and also declare what lines we're going to draw about what is beyond the realm of the acceptable here in our community. I have not, our Chen Hall has not been subject to those actions since then. I've gotten an awful lot of questions about my security. I will tell you that it is, both as an ambassador, it was my practice to never talk about my security arrangements. That is a practice that I'll continue here. I will say that we have a superb public safety team, and yes, we feel safe. But as I also said, our team here, our first line of defense is not our police. Our first line of defense is our values, and making clear as a community what expectations of conduct are. And I've been very, very heartened by that. As to motivations, I was very intentional about not characterizing these assaults as racist. It is true that the messages that were left behind my front door did not contain classically understood racist words or tropes, but neither were they love letters. And given the well-documented and tragic history in the American South of terrorizing and intimidating Black families under cover of darkness, and given my own family's lineage, going back to all of my sets of great-grandparents, every generation of my family having to endure nighttime intimidation, one might reasonably interpret those acts through that historical frame. I have done neither, because frankly, I don't believe that I have an obligation to deduce with precision the motives of people who would anonymously and continuously assault the safety and dignity of my home under cover of darkness. However, I am also the leader of this community. And I would tell you that if those actions had happened to any other member of this community, we would not rest until the perpetrators were identified. But because I also have to lead this community, I made the judgment that we are better off leaning into public forgiveness and using this moment as a dividing line, a before and after point between what at least some members of our community thought was acceptable, they thought they could get away with before, and what everybody ought to be abundantly clear now is categorically unacceptable going forward. So that's where we are.
That's exactly right. Well, I can hear the bells again at 7 o'clock, and I just have enjoyed this evening. It felt like 5 minutes, and I've already had some comments saying, let's have another one. So we'll see if we can work that out. But anyway, thank you, Vice Chancellor, for being here tonight. Thank you for all the alums for spending the night with us, and we look forward to being with you soon.
Thank you. Good night. Ciao. Bye-bye.